Want to know why? Ask how. Howard, the humongous. On Friday night, July 15th, world headlines told us that there was a coup attempt in Turkey. But there is a possibility, just a possibility, that the coup in Turkey is a scam. A very expensive scam. Hundreds were killed. 3,000 soldiers were arrested. 2,700 judges were bounced out of their jobs. But the coup has not toppled the man who counts the most, Turkey's leader, Recep Tayyip Erdogan. In fact, far from it. The coup has helped Erdogan achieve a goal he's been after for years, to become Turkey's dictator for life. Since 2015, Erdogan has attempted to achieve his aim by more or less democratic means. He has pushed for a new constitution that gives the president unprecedented powers. And the president of Turkey just happens to be, guess who? Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Who is Recep Tayyip Erdogan? Good question. We have to find our space here. Recep Tayyip Erdogan was born 62 years ago in 1954. His father was a coast guard on the shores of the Black Sea, a sea whose margins Turkey shares with Russia and the Ukraine, among other countries. Erdogan's dad was ambitious for his kids and moved the family to the big city, Istanbul. Why? To up their chances of rising in life. Istanbul once went under several other names. It was called the New Rome and Constantinople by the Roman Emperor Constantine, who demoted Rome and made Istanbul the new capital of the Roman Empire in 330 AD. Istanbul also went under the name of Byzantium. You've heard of the Byzantine Empire. Byzantium was its core city, its capital city. Istanbul was one of the two capitals of Christianity, either under the name Byzantium or under the name Constantinople. The other city that was a capital was Rome. But Byzantium was one of the two capitals of Christianity for 1,123 years. So why is it filled with Muslim Turks? Because the armies of the Islamic Empire, the armies of Islamic imperialism and colonialism, defeated Byzantium and took over in 1453 AD, a mere 563 years ago. Recep Tayyip Erdogan worked his way up from the bottom. This is admirable. As a kid, it is said that he sold lemonade and sesame buns in Istanbul's toughest neighborhoods to earn spare change. From his youth, Recep Tayyip Erdogan had one foot in modernism and the other in traditional Islam. He was educated in an Islamic school. Then he got a degree in something thoroughly modern, management. It is also said that he played professional football. Then Erdogan got involved in politics, a field where he succeeded mightily. In college, Erdogan hooked his star to a man 26 years older than he was. That man was Necmettin Erbakan, who would become Turkey's very first Islamist prime minister. And Islamism is where the problem would begin for Erdogan. Islamism is the desire to subject a nation to Islamic law, to Sharia, and to Islamic political and military control. Joined with his Islamist, let's see if we can turn this page, joined with his Islamist mentor, Erdogan worked his way up to mayor in his hometown, Istanbul. Not bad. But Turkey has a strange history. Under the Ottomans, Turkey became the capital of the Islamic Empire. It was the home of the Caliphate. Yes, the very same caliphate that ISIS now claims to be resurrecting in Syria and Iraq. But in roughly 1913, the Ottoman rulers of Turkey and of the Islamic Empire made a mistake. They allied themselves with Germany in World War I. When they and their allies lost, the countries that won, the Allies, the US, Britain, and France, carved the Ottoman Empire up into separate states. Turkey was a mere remnant. And the Allies became that remnant's rulers. But a Turkish nationalist, a man known best today as Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, led a war for Turkish liberation from 1919 to 1922. Ataturk shook off the yoke of the Europeans and founded a new nation, modern Turkey. Then Ataturk made himself head of state for life. But he insisted on several other values, values that you and I would welcome. Ataturk insisted that Turkey be democratic. And he insisted that Turkey be, most important, secular. Whenever Turkey looked like it was about to fall off the secular path, the military has upheld the tradition of Ataturk and has stepped in, thrown a coup, and taken the nation back to secularism and democracy. Coups have been a good thing in modern Turkey. In fact, there have been 4 coups in just the last few decades, including a coup that toppled Recep Tayyip Erdogan's Islamist mentor, Necmettin Erbakan. Erdogan has been in power in Turkey now for the past 14 years, since 2002. Erdogan heads an Islamist party, and he has been steering Turkey more and more into political expressions of Islam. So the idea that there might be a new coup aimed at Erdogan has seemed entirely plausible. The military has thrown other coups to make sure that Turkey stayed on the secular path. But is the new coup for real? Since 2015, Recep Tayyip Erdogan has been trying to put a new constitution in place. The new constitution would allow Erdogan to be president for life, a president with dictatorial powers. But Erdogan keeps running into stumbling blocks in his attempt to install this new constitution. To prevent criticism, he has shuttered the independent press and has turned Turkey's media into a mere propaganda outlet. He has, in fact, had journalists killed or beaten. More problems with fighting with paper. Then there was the election in June of 2015, not very long ago. Erdogan was on the brink of getting enough votes in the parliament to pass his killer constitution, the constitution that would make him or allow him to be president for life. But a peace party, spearheaded by Kurds, got a huge swell of support and prevented Erdogan from achieving the majority he needed to switch constitutions. He was not a happy man. He did not take this lightly. Erdogan had established a peace with the Kurds, a group that's traditionally been oppressed and has risen up in the Middle East, not just in Turkey. In fact, Erdogan was in negotiation with the Kurds over a final settlement. There had been peace for several years. But Erdogan single-handedly broke the peace. He attacked Kurdish villages viciously, and he used his monopoly of the press to portray Kurdish counterattacks as unprovoked assaults on Turks. By portraying the Turkish nation as under assault, Erdogan aimed to get a sense of solidarity from the populace, a sense of unity that would allow Erdogan to, guess what? To toss the Kurds and their allies out of the parliament and get the majority he needed to pass his new constitution. But Erdogan needed more than that. He needed to toss his opponents, wherever they were, out of power. For that, Erdogan needed violence. Perhaps a terrorist assault on an airport. Or better yet, a coup. Yes, a coup attempt. Bloodshed would get the public to back Erdogan. It would give him the popular enthusiasm he needed to kill or arrest his opposition. Why? Because Erdogan could say that those who opposed him were the real coup makers, and that to remove the danger to the public, these killers would have to be swept away. That's exactly what we're seeing now in Turkey. Almost 3,000 soldiers have been arrested and 2,700 judges sacked. Does anyone credible believe that the Friday coup may, in fact, be an Erdogan sham? The foe that Erdogan hates the most is a Muslim cleric, Fethullah Gulen. Gulen was once a close ally of Erdogan's until 2013. Then Erdogan was accused of lining his pockets and the pockets of his cronies with lots of money. Erdogan apparently blamed Gulen for the accusations. In fact, he accused Gulen of leading a terrorist organization, one of his most popular ways, one of the ways he uses most often to blacken someone he wants to destroy. Erdogan forced Gulen to flee from Turkey and seek refuge in the United States, in, of all places, Pennsylvania. Erdogan has blamed the Friday coup on guess who? On Gulen. But Gulen thinks it's just possible that the real coup master may be, and I bet you can't guess, Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Then there's Erdogan's 1,000-room personal palace, a building that cost more than $500 million, over $615 million in fact, and that building hints at big ambitions. And there's the fact that Erdogan has been the world's biggest supporter of ISIS. When foreign fighters have come to join ISIS, they've slipped in to Syria or Iraq through Turkey. When ISIS has wanted to make millions of dollars per day by selling oil, the oil has been sold in Turkey. And Erdogan has turned a blind eye, or perhaps even helped the process along. But we won't go into these minor problems. The bottom line is this. Recep Tayyip Erdogan is not a man you would want to cross. Unless, of course, you believed in secularism, pluralism, freedom of speech, or democracy. In which case, it would be your job to speak up. This is Howard the Humongous, speaking to you from the future. That it's your job and my job to make. Or, want to know why? Ask how. And now for the off button.